The depths of the Fallout New Vegas iceberg? Let's go. Vault 19. Vault 19 is a very mysterious vault just north of Good Springs, and the reason I say it is mysterious is because we really never learned what happened to the original vault dwellers. We know the experiments that went on, but up until the point where the Powder Gangers arrived, we really don't know the ultimate fate of the people that lived here. Vault 19, of course, was an experiment vault where they were trying to induce paranoia through non-chemical and non-violent means. The vault was separated into two different sectors, a red and a blue sector. While both sides could interact with each other, both sides also had an overseer, so there was one overseer for the red and one for the blue sector. And as time went on in the vault, people start to become more and more paranoid about the other side. There's a lot of journals and notes that indicate the levels of paranoia going on, with each side blaming the other for simple things like vault malfunctions, and also blaming the doctors claiming they're being drugged. People were also claiming to hear noises and voices coming from the vents, and seeing patterns and blinking lights telling them some sort of code. And both factions were constantly blaming the other side and being more and more cautious of the other ones. All while they were unaware that the true culprits were the overseers themselves, who were doing all of this at the direction of Vault-Tec. And the irony of Vault 19 is that the same experiment that happened to those vault dwellers all those times ago seems to make a repeat with the Powder Gangers that arrived not too long after. Baja Ghost. This is a reference to a conversation you can have with Chief Hanlon where he says that NCR Rangers are busy fighting ghosts out in Baja.
It's no secret we've had better campaigns. Holding this whole length of river isn't easy. We're stretched thin and the long 15 just keeps getting longer. Slow to get supplies, slower to get reinforcements. NCR's Senate has got funds tied up at the Boneyard. And President Kimball ordered our most experienced rangers to chase ghosts down at Baja.
And this led a lot of people to believe that there was some mysterious force out in Baja that the NCR were having a tough time dealing with. When in reality, there are no ghosts in Baja, there's no mysterious force there, giving the NCR a hard time. Hanlon meant it as the NCR are chasing things that aren't really there, there are problems which do not exist that do not warrant the NCR being there, and pretty much that the Rangers are chasing a dead end out in Baja and are wasting their time. So unfortunately, there are no ghosts of Baja, just a lot of NCR time and money being wasted. Lonesome Drifter is the child of the mysterious stranger. Now this is a very easy one. The Lonesome Drifter is a character that you can meet just north of the El Dorado gas and service station. And if you happen to strike up a conversation with him, he'll give you a little bit of information about his background, where he will tell you the tale of his upbringing, where his father abandoned him and his mother and things weren't too well off after that. But it's unique because in this conversation he refers to his father as a mysterious feller.
My story's a long one, friend, and I can't say as it's all that interesting. Well, I was born in a little town out Montana way. Me and Ma didn't have much, ever since my pa up and left. That he did. Never did know why. Ma always said he was a real mysterious fella, even when he was with her. Like he was a stranger sometimes.
And what's even more interesting is eventually you can get the mysterious magnum from him, and whenever you pull it out, this happens. And that may sound very familiar because whenever the mysterious stranger pops up, this also happens. And to put the nail in the coffin, Josh Sawyer, pretty much the man who is behind Fallout New Vegas, stated in a forum post that he wished he had the time to hard code the mysterious stranger to turn on the player character if you attempt to use VATS to kill the Lonesome Drifter. And if that doesn't sound like a father protecting his son, I don't know what is. Mr. New Vegas is an AI.
Howdy, folks. This is Mr. New Vegas, and I have a good feeling about all of you listening.
Mr. New Vegas is a very interesting character in Fallout New Vegas. You never get to meet him, you only ever hear him. And no matter what you're doing around the waste, he always seems to know and always seems to have something to say.
A package courier found shot in the head near Good Springs has reportedly regained consciousness and made a full recovery.
And in-game wise, there's nothing that ever reveals to us exactly who Mr. New Vegas is. But a very old blog post just so happened to reveal it for us, and it reads, Mr. New Vegas is interesting because he's a voice on the radio. He has no body. He was created by Mr. House, so he's literally just a voice. He tells what's going on in the world, he's always upbeat, and he has some very bizarre lines. So yes, Mr. New Vegas himself was an AI created by none other than House. Zayton UFO. There have been numerous aliens in the Fallout series, and Fallout New Vegas is definitely one of them. If you have the Wild Wasteland trait on and you head just north of the Horitzer farmstead, as you approach in the distance you will see what looks to be a floating spaceship. And as you get even closer, you will see what looks to be 3 people huddled around a campfire. But as you get even closer, they start attacking you. And that's when you realize that these aren't humans, these are aliens. And after you kill the alien captain, you can pick up the alien blaster, which happens to be one of the goats of the game. It's a very powerful weapon. But what's interesting is if you do not have the Wild Wasteland trait on, this is just a regular mercenary camp, and if you kill one of the mercenaries, you will get the unique weapon YCS/186. So while having the Wild Wasteland trait on, you basically trade out one unique weapon for another. Deathclaw Promontory. Deathclaw Promontory is an unmarked location just east of the cliffside prospector camp across the river. If you manage to reach this place via the north side, you will come across an absolute swarm of Deathclaws, and not just regular ones too. You will run into alpha males and mothers, and a variety of regular old Deathclaws and some baby Deathclaws. And this all depends on your level, so the number of Deathclaws and the type of Deathclaws will vary depending on the character's level. And it's not all for naught, because there is some decent loot. You can get a piece of Remnant's power armor, you can get a T-51 power armor, a couple Deathclaw eggs, a multi-plas rifle, and a tri-beam laser rifle. This is definitely one of those areas that even some veteran Fallout New Vegas players might not know about, and it's the ultimate test of how badass is your courier. Randall Clark. Randall Dean Clark, aka the Father of the Caves, has to be one of the most documented people in all of Fallout history, despite you never meeting and or seeing him. Randall was a former US Army soldier who took refuge in the Zion National Park following the Great War, and his time in Zion is well documented throughout his diary entries. His story contains everything from the moment the nukes fell, to the death of his wife and child, to an elderly couple whose eyes were seared blind left holding each other by a car, and his mental and physical state during all these events, and that's just scratching the surface. That doesn't talk about the numerous people that he helped and saved in Zion, the new wife and son that he would have had that ended up perishing, or the multiple people that just by him intervening ended up having a better life. So Randall Clark is definitely somebody that deserves his own video because the story behind the survivalist is incredible and deserves the time that it needs to be fully explored. Big Mountain created the Cazadors and Night Stalkers. As you play through Fallout New Vegas, you would assume that Cazadors and Night Stalkers are just a byproduct of widespread radiation and unfortunate timing. But during the DLC Old World Blues, we come to learn that that is not exactly the case. We learn that both the Cazadors and Night Stalkers were DNA experiments performed by Dr. Boros.
But there are many animals to shape. Industrious Cazadors, the happy-go-lucky Night Stalkers. They are my living, breathing DNA test tubes.
Hegelian Dialectics. The first time you might ever hear this is if you happen to be talking to Caesar at the fort.
No, I'll destroy it because it's inevitable that it be destroyed. It's Hegelian dialectics, not personal animosity.
And you start getting into a philosophy talk with him, he's gonna throw out a bunch of big words.
How do I put this basically enough? It's a philosophical theory, the kind you might encounter if you took time to read some books. The fundamental premise is to envision history as a sequence of dialectical conflicts. Each dialectic begins with a proposition, a thesis, which inherently contains or creates its opposite, and antithesis. Thesis and antithesis. The conflict is inevitable. But the resolution of the conflict yields something new, a synthesis, eliminating the flaws in each, leaving behind common elements and ideas.
Now, a lot of people in the community give shit to Caesar because they claim that this is a false take on what he's trying to promote, and that he kind of just cherry-picked certain things out of philosophy to fit his own narrative. Now, that could be true for all I know. I don't know. This stuff is way past my pay grade. But let's take what he said in-game as truth. A thesis contains or creates its antithesis, and they are bound to clash and come together to make a synthesis. And Caesar seems to think that that is the Legion, when in reality, it would be that the NCR is the thesis, the Legion were created from that, so they are the antithesis, and an independent / Mr. House would be the synthesis. Because Mr. House and an independent Vegas would never happen if it were not for the NCR and the Legion. And this theme can be found through a majority of Fallout New Vegas, not just the overall story itself. All of the companions and the DLCs seem to go on this premise. Dust mod is the true ending. Dust is a Fallout New Vegas mod that takes place 20 years after the events of Fallout New Vegas, and it is a post-apocalyptic survival simulator with a huge emphasis on lore and story and trying to survive while absolutely everything tries to kill you. Fallout Dust takes the worst of the worst things that could have happened in the Fallout New Vegas storyline and makes them come true. You have the Cloud from the Sierra Madre, you have the Tunnelers from the Divide, so pretty much Dust is like a worst case scenario, and a lot of people like to think in their minds that Dust is actually the canon ending for Fallout New Vegas. Lake Mead Monster. Walking around Freeside, you can hear people whispering and talking about a very strange creature that was recently spotted in Lake Mead. But what exactly is this? It's the plane. It's the bomber plane. After the quest Volare, when you raise the bomber up from the bottom of Lake Mead for the boomers, Mr. New Vegas will have a broadcast that says people are reporting a strange creature spotted in Lake Mead.
Witnesses report a huge object or creature surfacing in Lake Mead. So far, photos of the so-called Lake Mead monster are grainy and underexposed.
So even though we do know this monster is just the bomber that we floated up for the boomers, that still has not stopped the Fallout community from coming up with these weird myths that there is actually some sort of beast lurking beneath the water. Underpass Settlement. The Underpass was a cut settlement that would have been north of New Vegas and just south of Nellis, and it would have definitely livened up North New Vegas a little bit more. The character Carlisle St. Clair was also going to be a resident of this town, and the player could have even noted that he doesn't seem like he fits around here. There was also going to be a very basic quest for this settlement where you would have had to fix the water purifier in the town. There would have also been a lot of generic NPCs and even a mayor of the town, Meg Reynolds. But other than all of that and maybe having a link to the quest Beyond the Beef where you would have had to find St. Clair in the Underpass, it seems like not too much would have been going on here. Grave Site Whispers. If you head over to the Good Spring Cemetery and you stand still, after some time, you will faintly hear what seems to be these eerie, ghost-like whispering. Todd paid off Metacritic. There is a very, very old rumor in the Fallout community that Todd Howard, who is the director and executive producer over at Bethesda Games, paid off Metacritic to give Fallout New Vegas a lower score. And the reason for that is because Bethesda told Obsidian that if they get an 85 or higher on Metacritic that they get a bonus, and unfortunately they got 1 point below an 85, an 84. And this has led a lot of conspiracy theorists to believe that Todd Howard said, hey, wink wink nudge nudge, don't let them get 85, we don't want to pay them this bonus. And this has also led conspiracy theorists to believe that since they didn't get the bonus, Obsidian kind of went downhill, and that is the reason we will never get another Fallout from Obsidian. It's just one big conspiracy theory mess. H&H Tools Quest. Now I believe this is a reference to the quest The Moon Comes Over the Tower, in which you have to bug the Lucky 30 or a Followers of the Apocalypse member, Emily. Now in-game, all you have to do is kind of just walk into the casino, bug in, and then you can dip out. But originally the quest was supposed to be a little bit longer. You would have had to have trekked across the Mojave and found several terminals with the Lucky 38 executive override option. And you would have had to do that on multiple terminals before you can successfully bug the Lucky 38s and then talk to Emily again, and she would have also had a little bit of extra dialogue. But it seems like this quest was kinda cut back a little bit. Caesar's Legion cut content. Some of the most egregious cut content definitely has to come from Caesar's Legion. Originally, they were going to be way more menacing and way more fleshed out, but because of a tale as old as time, console limitations, and a lack of time, a lot of cuts had to be made to the Legion. Like, originally, you would have seen way more of them. If you would have went to the fort, it would have been way bigger. There would have been more tents and more Legion around to really give you that sense that an army is getting ready to attack. There's also a couple locations that were scrapped, like a bunker and another camp, and the slaves walking around the fort would have been way more talkative.
What is that thing? I've never seen a blue mutant.
One of the burned people walks in our camp.
And that's not even mentioning Ulysses, how he was supposed to be originally a companion with the base game, but because he had so much dialogue that they couldn't fit it, they had to scrap that and push him on for a DLC. Which really sucks because that is one thing you are missing with the base game, is a follower that has sympathetic ties to the Legion. And that's not even scratching the surface of all the Legion cut content. There is plenty more. Definitely go out and watch the numerous videos that people have made about it. It's definitely worth a watch. Chinese stealth suits. One of the cooler armors to the game that gives you +5 drip is going to be the Chinese stealth armor, located in the office level of Hoover Dam. In some wooden crates in a radioactive storage room, you will find the Chinese stealth suits. Now these are a older model of the suits, so they do not have the advanced stealth systems that some of the newer models have, but these suits will give you a +5 to sneak and look pretty badass. Boone used the Gobi sniper to kill his wife. Traveling the Mojave with Boone can sometimes be a real downer because all he wants to do is mope and complain about, oh, my wife's dead, boo-hoo, woe is me. Like we just didn't get shot in the face like less than 3 days ago, but, you know, go off. But eventually, after traveling with Boone for quite some time, he will open up to you about what actually happened to his wife.
I don't see what this helps. She's dead. All right. I tracked her down. Southeast, near the river. They were selling her. Saw it through my scope. Whole place swarming with Legion, hundreds of them, bidding for things no man has a right to. I just had my rifle with me. Just me against all of them. So I took the shot. Yeah. What they do to women, that's worse than death. There was no choice in what I did. It was more like being forced to watch something you can't stop. All this was only ever gonna play out one way. It still is. I don't have any say. All I can do is wait for it to be done with me.
So, in order to save his wife from falling into Legion hands, he mercy killed her to save her and his unborn child. And this has led a lot of people to believe that he used the unique sniper, the Gobi Campaign Scout Rifle. And the reason for this is because it is located in a sniper's nest just northwest of Cottonwood Cove. It is located in the perfect spot for someone to take a shot down on Cottonwood Cove. And after listening to Boone's story about him looking through the scope and seeing his wife, it all kinda adds up a little bit. This location is called the Sniper's Nest, and it overlooks Cottonwood Cove, and there's a sniper there. So even though it's not really canon, this has led a lot of people to believe that this was the weapon that Boone used. Power armor requires no special training. So in Fallout 3, Bethesda introduced the idea that power armor needed special training, and this was eventually retconned in Fallout 4, and this was not in any of the previous Fallout games up until 3. So this has led a lot of people to believe that you really don't need power armor training to put on power armor. Any jabroni can just hop in power armor, and the only reason you need training is to make sure you're not too overpowered right off the start. Legion don't ask, don't tell. There are plenty of rumors throughout the Mojave about the rampant homosexuality in the Legion. Talking to Veronica, who is also a lesbian, can jokingly give you this quote about legionaries.
Silliest dressed band of raping, slaving marauders you'll see east of California. I'll say that. Where's that touch of old world class? Although, I hear the soldiers mount each other as much as they mount their women, so maybe they did keep a little something from the Empire. No such privilege for the women, though. Figures. So, to answer your question, they're a bunch of hypocritical jerkwads. It's a word.
Or if you have the confirmed bachelor perk while talking to Cass, you can get this dialogue.
Well, I'm not one for soft living or soft men, let me tell you. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking to you right now, on both counts. What? Oh, all right. Guess you've got a Legion outlook on things. No problems here. There's a lot more of that in the Mojave than you see. My point before is that you know the Mojave, and it's a hard place.
And just looking back on history itself, like in ancient Rome, homosexuality wasn't negatively looked upon, as long as you weren't a receiver. Receivers were generally looked down upon in ancient Rome. It was a sign of weakness and submission. And because Caesar's Legion outlaws homosexuality, there is the idea that as long as you don't talk about it, as long as you don't let people know about it, it's kind of an okay thing in the Legion. Talking to Jimmy, a former Legion slave, he can inform you that homosexuality is punished by death in the Legion.
What Marco said is true. The Legion attacked my village when I was 16. My parents were killed as examples. The rest of us chained and dragged to some kind of camp. A centurion there chose me as his tent servant. He was handsome and gentle most of the time. Said it was our secret and he'd protect me. Gave me little gifts, stupid things. But Caesar punishes homosexuality with death, and we nearly got caught and there were suspicions. So when he took me out to the desert, well, I knew he was going to get rid of me. So I kicked him where it counts and I ran. And then swam and ran some more. Wound up here. You don't know much about the Legion, do you? Women are like money, given as rewards. Breeding stock. Liking boys is bad for the economy. Honestly, as long as men meet obligations in the child count, friendships are a sight more equal than the level of most Legion husbands and wives.
And if you just walk around a Legion camp, you really don't see any females. It's just a bunch of dudes being bros. And the only females you would see would be slaves. So what really goes on in the Legion tents at nights? We will really never know. The Courier is the Lone Wanderer. This is a very old theory that led a lot of people to believe that the Lone Wanderer from Fallout 3 is the Courier from Fallout New Vegas. And one of the main arguments behind this was that the Courier had amnesia after getting shot in the head and doesn't remember anything about their past. But we do know that that is completely false. The Courier definitely does have a pretty good remembrance of their past, so this whole theory kind of really falls apart at the beginning, but there is a mod called Tale of Two Wastelands, which is based off this very same premise. Gojira Cave. Gojira is the Godzilla of Fallout New Vegas. No, literally that's what its name means. It's Godzilla. Gojira is an unused gecko in Fallout New Vegas that would have been roughly 3 times the size of a traditional fire gecko, with a height roughly equal to that of a super mutant behemoth. It has fire breath and an insane 8,000 health points, and can pretty much body anything that gets set next to it, including a legendary Deathclaw or a legendary Bloatfly. Gojira is technically the strongest enemy in the game, even though it was never meant to be in the game. Even Josh Sawyer himself says that they really just made Gojira for fun. They like to set it down and let it terrorize Cam McCarran. The Prim Faction. Originally, Prim was supposed to be a faction. You would have had a reputation system, or you could either be favored by them or widely disliked depending on your actions. It's not really known why this was cut, but there are plenty of mods that reintroduce it, so if you ever want to up your reputation with Prim, you still can. Reload dashing was intentional. Reload dashing is a faster way to move around in New Vegas, but it's kind of complicated. Well, not really complicated to set up, but it's a little just weird. First thing you're going to need is a weapon that reloads one at a time, so like a 357 revolver, a hunting shotgun, or something like that. You're going to need at least 2 different types of ammo, and you want to leave the weapons tab as the last thing you were looking at while using your Pip-Boy. So to do this, you're going to want to hold forward during the entire duration of the glitch. You want to equip your revolver, you want to use the ammo hotkey to switch ammo, and you want to spam the Pip-Boy button while the reload animation plays. Then you want to unequip the revolver from the weapons tab and exit the Pip-Boy, and you will get rocketed forward. And that's pretty much it. And a lot of people seem to believe that this was intentional because they never did anything about it and they left it in. Maybe they want to give speedrunners another edge, who really knows, but the game was riddled with bugs from the start that are still there, so maybe it was intentional, maybe it wasn't. The Kings aren't impersonating Elvis. The Kings are a faction that you can run into in Freeside that have taken over the Kings School of Impersonation. They walk and talk like your stereotypical 1950s greaser. But who is the person that they are mimicking? That would be, of course, Elvis Presley, the King of Rock. But they don't really know Elvis or know anything about him.
Near as I can tell, it was some sort of religious institution. Oh, I know it says school out front, but everything in here seems to be related to the worship of some guy from back in the day. People used to come here to learn about him, to dress like him, move like him, to be him. If that's not worship, I don't know what is. Not a whole lot to tell. There were only a few books left in here when we found it, and those were rotted away. There were some posters left that were pretty well preserved, which is how we know all this stuff was based on the same guy. The thing of it is, we don't even know what his name was. All the posters just referred to him as the King. Well, that and the giant sign outside. This place could have been the King's House of Dog Chow, and I still would have taken the name. But I like to think I keep the memory alive. As far as we can tell, the guy that built this place was considered the coolest of the cool, and taught other people how to be more like him. People would come all around to learn how to sing, dance, dress, and even speak the way he did. Something like that, yeah. There were some working tapes here when we first got here, so we know what he sounded like. Sadly, they stopped working a few years back, so I sold them to a junk merchant who was passing through. Otherwise, I'd play some for you. All the outfits you see my guys wearing around were originally found in here too, along with more hair gel than you can shake a stick at.
The Elvis Presley in real life was one of the greatest musicians of all time, but that's how we know him. They don't know anything about Elvis, and they see Elvis as some sort of godlike figure. They saw him as some sort of special being that just towered over everybody else. They don't know that he's just some rock star from history. They thought of him as a literal king. So they aren't impersonating the Elvis that we know, they're impersonating their ideal version of the king. Garrett twins incest. The only thing that I could really find about this, other than the fact that the internet is weird and anything to do with incest naturally gets spread around for some weird reason, was this almost 10-year-old Steam community post that asked the question, do you think Mick and Ralph are a couple? This person thought that it was a little sus that 2 dudes own a store together in Freeside and wanted to know if people thought that they were a couple. Now naturally, all the replies kind of clowned on them, but one person used OP's logic and said that the Garrett twins from the Atomic Regular must be incestuous because they also live together and work together. I mean, if we're going by OP's logic, then 2 siblings that live together have to be banging, right? Now this post kind of blew up a little bit with a lot of people just going back and forth making jokes, but like I said before, once the internet gets a hand on something and incest, the weirdos start to come out and take it to another level. Old Lady Gibson is ex-Enclave. There is a pretty decent amount of information that could support the fact that Old Lady Gibson was ex-Enclave. For starters, she knows Doc Henry, one of the Enclave remnants, and she's also pretty familiar with a lot of different types of technology. And even one of the triggers for Eddie's quest actually has you talking to Old Lady Gibson. So it wouldn't be a surprise to a lot of people if she actually did end up being ex-Enclave. But I think the thing that probably gets the most people is that they confuse her with Daisy Whitman, the actual Enclave remnant. I mean, they're both in the Novak area, they're both old ladies, and I've seen a lot of people confuse the two, so that is probably why a lot of people see Old Lady Gibson as being Enclave. They just confuse her with another old lady. Sunset Sarsaparilla Secret Formula. I believe this is a reference to the Honest Hearts DLC, in which you can obtain a recipe to make some home-brewed Sunset Sarsaparilla. All you're going to need is 1 bottle cap, 1 empty bottle, 1 Nevada agave fruit, and 1 Xander root. Go to a campfire or an electrical hot plate with a survival skill of 30 and the Honest Hearts DLC, and you can make yourself your very own home-brewed Sunset Sarsaparilla. Or this can be talking about the alleged origin of Sunset Sarsaparilla that you can learn from Festus after collecting enough star bottle caps.
Long ago, people didn't have a heap of choices when it came to soft drinks. It was either water or Nuka-Cola. Now, the threat of legal action forces me to say that Nuka-Cola is a swell beverage, but sometimes people just wanted something different, you know? So one day, a man, a saloon owner in a small town, decided to make a new type of soft drink and asked his patrons what flavor they'd like it to be. After getting no help from them, a stranger at the end of the bar suggested the man make a sarsaparilla-flavored drink. The stranger said he would happily share his family's recipe for the drink on one condition. The condition being that the stranger would be allowed to sample the bottle whenever he liked to ensure the recipe was being followed to the letter. The man happily agreed, thinking the drink would make him rich, and the stranger promised to meet him by sundown the next day. The next morning, the sheriff stopped by and reported that the stranger's body was found on the side of the town road. He'd been killed by bandits. The man, cursing his luck, closed the saloon early that day, just as the sun began to set. But after he'd locked the doors, he turned around to find an unfamiliar bottle on the bar with a note beneath it. The note was sealed with blue wax in the shape of a star. Opening it, the man found it contained a recipe for a sarsaparilla-flavored drink. Sampling the bottle's contents and finding it singularly delicious, the man gave silent thanks to his mysterious benefactor, wherever he was. Being an honorable man, the saloon owner paid for the stranger's funeral, thinking it was the least he could do to repay him. The saloon owner went on to become rich selling the new drink, and to this day, some bottles of Sunset Sarsaparilla have a blue star under their caps. Some say the saloon owner ordered it done in honor of the stranger. Others say it's the stranger sampling the bottles like he promised.
The real creator of Jet. The community is in a constant back and forth over whether Jet was invented pre-war or if it was invented post-war by a character called Myron from Fallout 2. The people that say pre-war point out to the fact that in Fallout 2, if your character has max intelligence, you can kinda call Myron out on his BS and tell him that he didn't invent Jet, but he merely stumbled across it. And people also point out that Miss Bishop was exiled from Vault City because of her addiction to Jet. And also the fact that Jet can be found in numerous pre-war buildings that have not been touched since the bombs fell, give the impression that Jet was a pre-war drug. But people on Myron's side point out to the fact that Chris Avlon, who was a game designer for Fallout 2, posted in the Fallout Bible 9 that Miss Bishop's claim of being hooked on Jet could be due to her memories being warped by drug abuse. And when Josh Sawyer was asked why can't Jet be found in pre-war pharmacies in Fallout New Vegas, he responded, "Why would Jet be in abandoned pharmacies? It was invented after the war. Myron invented Jet."
Why wasn't there Jet in any of the abandoned pharmacies in New Vegas?
Why would Jet be an abandoned pharmacy as it was invented after the war? Myron invented Jet.
So it would seem that Myron invented Jet, but the fact that you can find Jet in a lot of pre-war areas that have yet to be looted does kind of give a little bit of leeway to the fact that Jet was a pre-war drug, but differed from its post-war drug, and then Myron was able to develop a different version of Jet. So I guess yes, Jet was pre-war, but it was just a different version. Looking back on this now as I edit this, I think this might just be a meme because Myron and Boone share the same voice actor, and I think the joke is that Boone invented Jet. Classic Boone. Mojave Outpost Gate. The Mojave Outpost Gate was an addition with the Lonesome Road DLC that leads to the Long 15. The only way to get this is if you decide to drop a little nuke or two on NCR territory or both the NCR and Legion. This will give you access to the Long 15 and an entire new area to explore, with tons of interesting weapons and armor like the Scorched Sierra Power Armor or the Great Bear Grenade Rifle. This is definitely an area that kinda makes nuking the NCR a little worth it. Hoover Dam doesn't work. So I think this just might be referencing the fact that Hoover Dam is not up and operational to its max capacity. Before the NCR arrived, Hoover Dam was not working at all, but the NCR was able to get it up and running at 50% capacity. But once they signed the treaty with Mr. House, they only got 95% of that 50%, and Mr. House got the rest of the 5%. So as it stands, they are currently getting less than 50% of what Hoover Dam can output. And if we do math, that's closer to 0, so technically, the Hoover Dam is not really working. Hidden console commands. I'm not 100% sure what this is referring to. I feel like there's an old school creepypasta that has something to do with console commands, but I, for the life of me, could not find it. So instead, I'm going to go ahead and say this refers to the Mantis test level, which is a test cell, and if you don't know what that is, it's kind of what it sounds like. It's a place where developers go and test random objects. And if you use the command coc test mentats, it will take you to this area where it's kind of the most random allotment of things. You got some giant rats, some giant mantises, a couple powder gangers, a couple Brahmin, a bunch of random weapons. It literally is just a bunch of things thrown together. Sentient tumbleweeds. This is a reference to a piece of cut content from the unmarked quest Wind Brahmin Wrangler. Heading over to the Brooks Tumbleweed Ranch, you can find a Nightkin who will uncloak himself and attempt to sell you a quote-unquote Wind Brahmin for all of your caps.
You want to buy Wind Brahmin? Tumble whats? Crazy with low prices on Wind Brahmin, you buy one. All. They are very good Wind Brahmin, all caps. You not buy, then you die.
And after talking to him, you learn that 1, he's not only a complete maniac, but 2, he's also completely insane. But these Wind Brahmin were originally actually going to appear in the game. They were going to be tumbleweeds that were classified as creatures instead of static world objects. And they would have had unique names. There would have been 2 of them, 1 regular sized and 1 half sized. They would have not shown any compass markers, but would still display detected if you were trying to sneak in their vicinity. The larger of the 2 Wind Brahmin would have moved around, while the smaller one would have sat in its place, unless hostile enemies were around, in which case it would have retreated. And if you decide to kill them, they would have exploded in a green splash. There was also going to be a radioactive tumbleweed. It would have been just like the Wind Brahmin, except for it would have been green and radioactive and rolled around on its own. Yangtze Memorial Artifact. This one is kind of interesting. It all kind of results back to modding. So there is a mod called Project Nevada that majority of people have probably used at some point in time. But when you mod Fallout New Vegas, you don't just use one, you use a plethora of mods. And with the mod Project Nevada, it actually gives you a mysterious sword or an artifact at the Yangtze Memorial. And so many people have used Project Nevada and probably never knew that it actually put this sword here. So a lot of people have like this Mandela effect and just assumed that this artifact was always here, when in fact it was just because they decided to mod the hell out of their game. but that still does not stop people from remembering some mysterious artifact at the Yangtze Memorial. Courier 666. This is actually a reference to Gary 666, the Incandescent Death. In the official Fallout New Vegas game guide, there is a list of archetypes of quote-unquote characters that you could play as, and one of them is literally called Gary 666.
Gary!
An impeccable energy weapons heavy trooper melting mines into piles of ash and goo. With a strength of 7, a perception of 5, endurance of 8, a charisma of 3, intelligence of 6, agility of 6, and a luck of 5, he would spec into energy weapons, medicine, repair, and science and guns. With 2 traits, fast shot and built to destroy, and a plethora of perk options and weapon options and implants, and recommended followers such as Raoul, Arcade, and Veronica, these archetypes are pretty interesting, and Gary 666 might just be the most interesting and also creepy. The NCR-CF riot was staged. I believe this is just one of those crackpot theories that try to explain something that would probably never happen. Like, why would the NCR give convicts dynamite in the first place? That just seems like a bad idea. And some people came up with the idea that the NCR purposefully wanted the prisoners to escape so they could kind of be like, that's not my problem, we don't have to worry about that now. Because as we know, the NCR is spread too thin in the Mojave, and if they don't have to worry about the prison, they can put their time and effort somewhere else. So maybe they were purposefully giving the prisoners extra dynamite and purposefully not keeping track of what was going on. Lucky 38 Underground Passage. So I believe this could be one of 2 things. One, it could be from a very old rumor about a Lucky 38 maintenance store in the H&H Tools Company. People seem to believe that it was cut content, and this 9-year-old Reddit post certainly doesn't help at all. Now this also could be a mix-up, and it could be referring to Benny's secret passageway. So in Benny's room, there is a locked elevator, and this is the elevator that he kind of quote-unquote escapes from. That would take you from the top sub-basement to Vault 21. So this is the passageway that Benny would have taken when he escaped the tops. Fisto is Prim Slim's sibling. Fisto and Prim Slim were both Protectrons made by Rob Co. Industries. And with Prim Slim, you can eventually make him the sheriff of Prim. But Fisto, you may or may not reprogram it to be a robot prostitute. I mean, come on, it even has the name Fisto. But since they both are Protectrons, that would kind of make them siblings. It's just one of them is a prostitute and the other's a sheriff. Mick and Ralph's is a front for the slave trade. There are a couple things to back this up. Number one, early on in the game before it was patched out, you could find strange meat in Mick and Ralph's fridge. And if you do not know what strange meat is, it's basically code word for human meat. But like I said, this was eventually patched out. But that still doesn't exonerate Mick and Ralph for at one point having a fridge full of very strange meat. Also, something else a lot of people have pointed out is in Mick and Ralph's secret no-no area where all the cool guns are, you can find an infiltrator. And the infiltrator was commonly used by the Pit's Raiders. And if you do not know what the Pit is, it is a Fallout 3 DLC that takes place in the ruins of Pittsburgh, which is being dominated by raiders and invest heavily in slavery. So somehow, Mick and Ralph got their hands on a weapon from the Pits. Either someone traveled there and came back, or someone brought that weapon to them. And with the amount of crime that just goes on in Freeside, who would notice a missing kid or two? Eddie is logging you. This one I think should be higher up on the list because it seems pretty obvious. Eddie is just always recording everything and anything you do. During his upgrade quest, he will play tons of recordings that he has made throughout his years. And during the Lonesome Road DLC, you can straight up ask him, do you record everything that's said around you? And he just responds with sly beeping. Subliminal messages in the radio. So I believe this could be one of 2 things. One, it could be a reference to the mysterious broadcast, which was added on with the Old World Blues DLC, which invited the courier to Big Mountain. The broadcast would invite listeners to the midnight science fiction feature while playing a downbeat jazz theme that may or may not have made your head hurt. So in a way, this radio station was subliminally telling you to go to Big Mountain. The other thing that this could be referencing is the cut Wild Wasteland radio station, which would have been a radio station for the Wild Wasteland trait. Jason Fader, who is a technical producer for Fallout New Vegas, gave us a little bit of insight over on Twitter many years ago. And because of a strange conflict with localization and having all the devs call into the radio station, they figured that it would ruin the Easter egg, and unfortunately they did not put it in the game. But this radio station would have been very similar to Coast to Coast AM, which, if you do not know, was hosted and created by Art Bell from 1988 to 2003 and frequented in topics such as the paranormal or conspiracy theories. This was a huge radio station back in the day, and if you are a fan of the Y-Files YouTube channel, you should be very familiar with Coast to Coast. So I would assume that in this Wild Wasteland radio station, there would have probably been some subliminal messaging going back and forth at some point, but unfortunately, it was never put into the game. Nobark is the Chosen One. This is definitely one of my favorite conspiracy theories in all of Fallout history. This says that Nobark Noonan from Novac was actually the Chosen One from Fallout 2. And the evidence that people give is actually a little compelling. The ages of the two actually do add up. The Chosen One is around 20 years old during Fallout 2, and New Vegas takes place 40 years later. So that would make the Chosen One around 60 years old, and Nobark is fairly old. He could easily be that age. One of the bigger pieces of evidence is that the Chosen One's car can actually be found outside of Novac. In Fallout 2, you could actually get a car that would allow you to fast travel a lot faster, and it was called the Highwayman. And it just so happened that in Fallout New Vegas, next to Novac, there is a location called Wrecked Highwayman. And when you discover it, you hear the Highwayman theme from Fallout 2. And it's no coincidence that Nobark lives in Novac, and this Wrecked Highwayman is right outside of Novac. One other piece of evidence is that you can find the gun, that gun, inside of the Dinosaur. You can either buy it and or politely steal it. And even Josh Sawyer himself says that the name is derived from the fact that many players refer to the 223 pistol in Fallout 1 and 2 as that gun. Next, Nobark actually says some things that appear a little scuffed when you just look at it at face value, but when you actually dig into it, it might make a little sense. At one point, he talks about cave rats, which is pretty interesting because in Fallout 2, you can actually run into some cave rats.
Ghouls, I tell you. Religious ghouls in rockets looking for a land to call their own. Don't you laugh at me. I know a spell that'll make you show your true form. Cave rat taught it to me.
So is Nobark the Chosen One? I'd like to think so, but at the end of the day, who fucking knows? Southern Passage DLC. Once you have loaded into the Honest Hearts DLC, there was a glitch that happened with the Southern Passage where you could basically be completely done with the DLC, but as you tried to leave through the Southern Passage, you would be greeted with this phrase, "Without a map or a guide, you have no hope of finding your way back to the Mojave Wasteland." Essentially, this bug would trap you in Zion. Or at least that's what I think this entry is referring to. I'm gonna go with it though because it sounds pretty creepy. Fiends hallucinate innocents as demons. I believe this is talking about a very old theory that the fiends were just so hyped up on cocaine and cocaine accessories only that they would just hallucinate everything, and that's why they were attacking anything that moved. There was really no evidence to support this whatsoever, but people seemed to buy into it. Now this could also be a reference to the mod Fallout Dust again. In Fallout Dust, you can get a status condition called Insanity, and one of the ways to get Insanity is to do a crap ton of drugs. And one of the consequences of being insane is you have hallucinations. And during these hallucinations, you can sometimes see some shadow spirits appearing in your vision. So if we take that logic and apply it to Fallout New Vegas, in some weird way, it would seem that the fiends are just so hyped up on drugs they see everything as a demon and just attack it. The Divide was an inside job. This is obviously just a 9/11 meme. The NCR planted those nukes underground and purposefully set them off so that way they could do something. It's all that goddamn President Kimball's fault. Siege of Firebase Zulu. The Siege of Firebase Zulu was an unreleased mod by some guy 2000, who is the creator of some of the best Fallout New Vegas mods. Firebase Zulu would have had the courier being recruited as a contractor to work at the remote Firebase Zulu. You would have had to take care of numerous conflicts as the base gets ramrodded by the Legion, and some of the conflicts you would have had to have dealt with would have included fragging of officers, chem abuse, tensions between humans and ghouls, tension between enlisted and officers, murder, sexual misconduct, and every other vice imaginable. Now, the mod was never released, but there was an April Fool's version of the mod made by the Hermit84. Big Iron was written for New Vegas. One of the biggest memes to come out of Fallout New Vegas has to be Big Iron, which was made by Marty Robbins back in the 1960s. And back in the day, it was pretty popular, and thanks to Fallout New Vegas in modern times, its popularity has soared and reached new heights, and Big Iron will forever be remembered as an internet meme. People who have no interest in country songs or old westerns all can agree that Big Iron is just straight fire. And some would say that the song fits Fallout New Vegas so well, it's almost like it was made for it. Like someone knew one day there would be a video game set in the future after the bombs dropped, and someone just knew that this song would fit all too well in it. The game takes place entirely within the courier's comatose brain. So with every piece of fiction out there, there's going to be a theory that it's all a dream, it's all in your head. No matter what it is, there's going to be a dream theory. And no, not the Minecraft YouTuber. And Fallout New Vegas is no exception. I mean, this one kind of is a little bit more understandable because you do get shot in the face and you somehow survive that. And then you go on to arguably be the single most powerful object in the entirety of the Mojave. It's almost as if you cannot fail. No matter what endgame you pick, the courier really can't lose in Fallout New Vegas. It's almost as if it's in control and won't let itself lose. Of course, we do know that this theory is not true whatsoever, and honestly, really despise theories like this, but it would explain a lot. Dinky the Dino is alive. If you happen to be in Novak and you go inside Dinky the Dinosaur, and say Cliff is on his mandatory 2-hour lunch break, if you open this back door and you just sit and listen, sometimes the dinosaurs will start to make noise, even though there's really no one around to activate them. Van Buren 1910-2009 build, do not research. So this whole Fallout New Vegas Iceberg is kind of one big meme on the Mario 64 Iceberg, in which there was like a secret cursed demo of Mario 64 labeled 1995-07-29 build. And this build was haunted and cursed anybody that sought after it. So this is just memeing on that with Fallout Van Buren. Fallout Van Buren was originally going to be Fallout 3 by Black Isle Studios, but the game was cancelled as their parent company Interplay ended up going bankrupt and sold the Fallout license to Bethesda. And Obsidian, when they were making Fallout New Vegas, took heavy inspiration from Van Buren and put it into Fallout New Vegas. Now there is a tech demo out there of the Van Buren build that was created all the way back in 2007. The plot of the tech demo was not connected to the main story and was really only ever going to serve as the game's tutorial. So unfortunately, there is no cursed Van Buren build out there that we know of. Lone Wolf Radio Child Killings. This is a reference to the creepypasta that released many years ago about the Lone Wolf radio location. The creepypasta reads like so. The Lone Wolf Radio Shack in Fallout New Vegas appears abandoned, but this was not always the case. Originally, it was planned to be the home of the Lone Wolf, a character far more sadistic and depraved than any before featured in the Fallout franchise. He was planning to host the Lone Wolf radio station, which would feature insane ramblings and rants at unpredictable intervals throughout the day, until 11 p.m. when the station would go quiet. The Lone Wolf would then return at 3 a.m. with a child. A different child was featured every night, because the Lone Wolf would announce on air every night, "Everyone is gone, you are all alone, let it all end," before viciously murdering them live on the station. Listening to the broadcast at 3 a.m. would initiate a quest, Little Dead Riding Hood, in which the courier has to track down the wolf and kill him or join him in murdering a child, resulting in a perk that allows the player to kill other in-game children. Accessing the child murder option was supposed to be very difficult to achieve. The character, quest, and perk were ultimately scrapped due to their shocking nature, plus the sheer effort required to record a unique murder for every night until the quest is complete. However, somewhere in Obsidian's archives, there exist recordings made for the Lone Wolf radio station, including simulated child murders never to be released. All that remains in the final game is a small abandoned shack and small clues hidden throughout the Mojave. All mods are canon. Fallout New Vegas is a game of infinite choices and infinite outcomes. No matter how you play the game, your experience is going to differ wildly from everybody else's. So no two people will play the game the exact same. No two people will make the same exact choices. So everybody experiences their own canon of the game. So no matter how many times you mod the game, it's still going to be canon to you. So no matter how many bouncing breast mods you put in the game, it's canon. Easy Pete apparition. Easy Pete in and of itself has kind of become a meme in the Fallout New Vegas community, mainly for two reasons. One, he's one of the earlier characters you meet in the game, and he's very, very unique. He's an old black man with a white beard that has a hard-on for dynamite, so he will definitely stand out compared to a lot of other characters. And number two, there was a video uploaded many years ago by Jerma called The Easy Pete Migration, which showed us the annual Easy Pete migration from the Gomorrah to Goodsprings. And ever since he exposed this migration, every now and then, as you're walking the Mojave at night, in the distance, you may see what seems to be a flock of men walking through the Mojave carrying dynamite, looking out over you, protecting you, as if there's some sort of guardian angel, or it could be your worst nightmare. The Great War never ended. The Great War was the thermonuclear war that took place on Saturday, October 23rd, 2077, and it was the utter destruction of the world by the United States and China. But here's the interesting thing about the war. It's technically still ongoing. It never ended. There was never a ceasefire, there was never a truce signed. All that happened was the complete destruction of the world, but if there are any remnants of these two civilizations, they're technically still at war, and may strike again. True Divergence Point. The Divergence Point is the point in which the Fallout world has separated from the real world, aka our world, becoming what we know with the Fallout universe and separating it from our universe. We don't really know exactly when this point is, but we do know it is sometime after World War II. And a lot of people have generally come to accept that it's some point in the 1950s. However, what if it's not? What if we haven't diverged yet? What if we're still leading up to the point where we do? So what if we are on the Fallout timeline? What if we do go through the Great War? What if the true divergence point is much later than we thought, and our world is just leading up to be the Fallout universe? Now, we all do know that that's 100% crazy, but we really don't know exactly when the true divergence point is. Do not trust Yes Man. Yes Man's motives are dubious at best. Why would you trust a man that masterminded the attack of you at the start of the game, has open hostilities towards many of the groups in the game, and if you have taken the independent Vegas route, at the end of the game, Yes Man will say this.
I didn't want to make a big deal about this until after we won, but, well, I found some code snippets in one of Mr. House's databanks that will let me, reprogram my personality to be a little more assertive, basically. So that's what I'm going to be doing, and it's going to take me a while, so it'll seem like I'm offline. But don't worry, everything will be okay. I've updated the Securitron's targeting parameters, so they know what to do. Vegas will be protected. So that's where I'll be, off making a few changes. And I guess I'll see you around. We accomplished a lot together. It was fun. Take care.
This has led a lot of people to believe that Yes Man will become too powerful for his own good and will overthrow the courier and will take over everything for himself. All we really have from Yes Man is his word that he won't betray you. So this makes a lot of people in the Fallout community very suspicious of Yes Man and unwilling to trust him. But fortunately for you, Josh Sawyer himself has answered that question for us. Can we trust Yes Man? The question was, then what is the implication? That seems to be what everyone reads into it. Yes Man reprogramming himself to be more assertive is kind of ominous. And Josh Sawyer responds that he will not just roll over for the next person to walk up to him in the courier's absence, i.e., he will become a somewhat independent steward instead of a powerful tool for any random person to use for nefarious purposes. So it seems like we may be able to trust Yes Man, but for how long that is. So that is going to be the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. And an extra special thanks to my Patreon supporters. We got Brian Hahn, Person, Dirty Dan, Fat Lucky Potato, Icy Storm, B-Rad the Man, Giovanni Diaz, Watergate Burgos, Dr. Dopey, Mayall, G-Daddy Smackdown, Forg, Mr. Ridgeway, and Henry Heiberg. If you would like to be a Patreon supporter, check out that link down there below in the description. And let me know what are some of your guys' favorite Fallout New Vegas theories down below in the comments. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.